Australia has a long history of putting workers' lives and in fact the community's lives at risk by the use of asbestos.
6,000 tonnes of refined fibre leave Australia's only blue asbestos field.
Many thousands of people in Australia have been sick and died as a result of exposure to asbestos.
This company produced products from 1930 that killed people.
It's been about 40 years since asbestos was last mined in Australia, and almost 20 years since campaigners secured compensation and an outright ban on the deadly mineral.
It'll change things for the younger generation who are coming up, I might add. They're not going to be exposed to asbestos anymore, thankfully, like their grandfathers and their parents were before them.
But a new generation is at risk of exposure and disease because asbestos is slipping into the country.
One of the issues is that asbestos is incredibly cheap. There's a lot of it in Asia, and it's incredibly cheap for someone that's looking for a price break on bringing in 10 container loads of plasterboard sheeting because they can buy it cheaper from China. You're playing Russian roulette.
The latest discovery came in September when USG Boral found raw materials it imported from China to make plasterboard were tainted with asbestos. The company declined to be interviewed, but said low levels of asbestos were found at each of its manufacturing sites in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. USG Boral says specialists removed the affected product and the facilities have been deep cleaned.
There is absolutely no safe level of asbestos exposure. Literally, one fibre can eventually lead to death. This is how dangerous this product is.
The scare prompted testing across the nation where the plasterboard had been used, including at this Brisbane construction site which was found free of asbestos. But it's not only imported building products tainted with asbestos. Since the start of last year, imported remote control cars, engine gaskets, billiard table irons and Sydney's new ferries have been found to contain the deadly mineral. Those products and equipment were made in Asia, mostly in China, where asbestos is legal.
It all comes down to the almighty dollar.
Asbestos Victims Association President Peter Baxter knows firsthand the impact of breathing in deadly fibres. He was diagnosed with the lung disease asbestosis in 2004 after working at a James Hardie plant in Adelaide 20 years earlier.
You tire very quickly. And I was always pretty active, I always had hard jobs. But now I can't even cut my lawn without having to stop and have a break.
He says the threat from foreign asbestos shouldn't be underestimated, as exposure and disease can come years later.
Once you scrape it or drill it or break it and all that, you're releasing the fibres, the children's stuff, the toys and all that. That's wrong. That's really wrong. So they're at risk, and that's what I don't like.
In 2016, the ABC ran a series of reports revealing asbestos-contaminated building products from China had been used in the construction of portable structures on a Brisbane high-rise building and in Perth's new Children's Hospital. Back then, Border Force conceded it was testing only a handful of imported products and pledged a crackdown.
In China, a product can be asbestos-free even if it actually contains up to 5% of asbestos material. Of course it bothers me, I have a family too, and I don't want my child to be standing on a building site and be exposed to asbestos.
Despite calls for more testing, Australian Border Force figures show this year as few as 4 consignments were tested in March. All of those were tainted with asbestos. In June, 7 were tested. The majority came back positive.
We don't have an effective system that means there is enough testing or enough prosecution of those companies that are continuing to import products that put at risk workers who work with the products, but also everyone in the community.
Australian Border Force declined to be interviewed, but says it continues to target goods at risk of containing asbestos and regularly reviews and refines its targeting methodology.
We need a dedicated unit within Australian Border Force to look for asbestos-related products, to take serious action to stop their importation.
I can't remember what the number of containers that come into a port like Melbourne or Sydney, but it's many, many thousands a day. So to assume that the Border Force has the facilities and the staff available to test every container that comes in and see what's in it it's not practical.
Andrew Manton is an asbestos auditor based in Singapore. Companies pay him to test goods they plan to import into Australia. He has many examples of equipment testing positive, despite supplier assurances it's asbestos-free.
There was some equipment that was definitely set aside for Australia. It had the big Australian flag on it and looked all lovely when we were there. But right next to it was all this other equipment. They both come back as containing asbestos. The cheaper you buy a product, generally, the cheaper the components and the less stringent they are about maintaining those standards.
Australian Border Force says if it doubts the authenticity of import documents, it will make inquiries to establish their validity. But customs broker Colin Brame says Australia has little power to enforce compliance overseas.
The trading level that China has around the world is substantial. They're probably not going to take much notice of our zero tolerance.
We also need to be part of a global ban that stops the production and the use of asbestos around the world.
I'm glad we've got a memorial now because the people can attend to lay their flowers and show their respect.
Later this month, Peter Baxter will host a Memorial Day to commemorate asbestos victims. He says there's no point having a strict ban on imported asbestos if it's not strictly enforced.
If they don't do anything about it, the next generation, they will get it. There's no doubt about it. And we're still getting a lot of asbestos cases. We don't want any more.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.